Hello, friends. This is Peter Herbeck. I hope you're at peace in Christ. I want to talk today a little bit about the recent Supreme Court leak around the issue of abortion. Not so much the leak itself, but the response to it, the rage and the madness and the overwhelming fear and anger that's rising in parts of the culture around this issue, and the desperate way in which some human beings are just clinging to abortion as the key, or one of the fundamental keys, to ensuring their freedom, their happiness, their security, their power, their identity. And somehow we just can't live without this right to take the life of my own child right up to the child's first breath. Somehow I have to be able to have that power in my life, or I can't be free and I can't be happy. And therefore, you're taking away a fundamental source of power and life in me, a right that I have, and it's totally destabilizing people. Now, there's a lot that can be said about it, but the main thing I want to focus on today is what I think are some of the serious, fundamental spiritual realities that underlie it, because it's fundamentally a spiritual battle. And always remember, friends, no human being ultimately is my enemy. We have disagreement, that's real. We have to stand up and bear witness to the truth, and it can get very intense. But that human being is not my enemy, somebody that I have a right to hate or to mistreat. I always have to see the truth about the other person. Like Jesus said, we must love our enemies. And that means to will the good of people who don't like us at all, or who are radically opposing us around issues as dramatic and intense as this. So there's a powerful passage in Acts 26 where St. Paul is standing up before the Hebrew king, religious leaders as well, and he's talking about his experience on the road to Damascus. He's giving his testimony about his encounter with Jesus when he's walking, and Christ is revealed to him. The Lord reveals himself to him, and Paul is struck by this overwhelming light, and he's experiencing the glory and the majesty and the wonder and power of who Jesus is. And his eyes are opened, and he sees for the first time a kind of light he never knew even existed, ultimately. And then Jesus gives Paul his assignment. He said, "Why am I appearing to you?" He says, "I'm appearing to you because I'm going to send you to the people, to the Gentiles in particular." He said that you might open their eyes, that they might turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. This is a simple summary of the whole mission of the church, of the Christian people in the world. We live in a fallen, darkened world, a world that's under a dominion and a power, and the power is the power of darkness, right? The deception, the lies of the murderer, Satan himself, right? So this is a power, this is a reality. And Jesus is calling Paul, and he's empowering Paul to go forward to be able to address it directly. So Christianity, and becoming Christian, is to move from darkness to light, and from the kingdom of Satan to God. Now, do people know that? Do human beings who are in that default mode, do they understand fully what's going on, that they're in darkness, or that they're in the kingdom of the enemy? They don't. But Jesus said very clearly, when darkness itself is your light, how blind can you be? Right? So what you see, there's some key passages, I think, in the New Testament that help us grasp kind of what we're up against, this darkness and the power that's wielded by these dark powers that are in the world today, and how it affects the mind. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 says, it's the devil's strategy to enslave the human race through the fear of death. Now, every human being at some level is fighting against and staving off the power of death. Death is a dominion. It has power, right? And it is a disordered energy that troubles the human mind and the human heart. And we fight against it, and it's frightening when human beings see it face to face. We don't even like to talk about death. It's like so gauche or whatever to talk about it at all, because it's very disturbing for people. They don't like to think about it. And so it's a dominion and a power that Jesus came and destroyed. Right? John 1 says, in Jesus, says, in him was life, and the life that was in him is the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. The only thing that can overcome the darkness of this fallen world is the light that's in Christ. That's why he came into this world, right? And notice what John says, in him was life, and the life that was in him was the light. That in some way you can understand it this way, that death does not have the final power. There is something greater than the dominion of death. It's the life that's in Jesus Christ, the indestructible power. And that life is a light for us because we can see it in him. So Jesus himself said, I'm the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This is really critical. How do you not walk in darkness in this fallen world? And the darkness is ignorance of God, ignorance of the meaning of life, can't understand who we are, the meaning of life, its purpose, the dignity of the human being, all of it, God's plan and purpose for the human race. So if you don't know that, you don't have light about the fundamental realities, and that light is the truth about God, the truth about Christ, the truth about us in relationship to God. That's where Jesus reveals, he's the truth that reveals to us the light of the reality of who we are and who God is. And in him, as he reveals it, is a life, and that's the life of God and the life of heaven. It's God's eternal life present, which is greater than the power of death itself. And so Jesus disarmed on the cross the principalities and powers, made a public show of them, and he broke the power of the dominion of darkness. That's why he could say, I'm the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness. He's the way, the truth, and the life. So apart from him, to a greater or lesser degree, human beings are in darkness. So one of the things that the recent popes have put their finger on, I think, is to understand how this battle expresses itself in culture, politics, and in life. I've quoted Pope Benedict XVI on these YouTube videos many, many times, and I'm going to quote him again as he's reading what's going on in the culture and why this rage is intensifying and why people are clinging so much to idols in this world to give them hope and strength and identity. He said, today, the light of faith is great danger that the light of faith is going out like a flame which no longer has fuel. The light, which comes from what? Faith and knowledge of the true God, that's revealed fully in the person of Jesus. We access that light in the relationship with God through faith, right? And he said, so it's a way of knowing, and it's a way of radically trusting and living under the awareness of who the Lord is and under his lordship that brings freedom and light to our spirit. And we understand we don't have to be afraid of death. Life is short, right? And we live with an eternal perspective, and we actually have an experiential knowledge of the presence and power of the Lord in such a way that it gives us confidence and hope that it's all real and true, okay? So, but the Holy Father is saying, here's the current state of the battle in some ways between the two kingdoms, that in many places in the world today, the faith is in danger of dying out like a flame which no longer has fuel. He said what's happening is humanity's pushing God from the human horizon. Remember, God is light. And so if you push God willfully away to ignore him, to suppress the truth about him, what the Holy Father points out very clearly is he said, then darkness begins to settle in on the human mind. And humanity starts to lose its bearings on reality itself with increasingly evident and destructive effects. So that's you see that, so the spiritual battle is happening throughout many, really all over the world. And cultures are being affected by the fact that faith, the light of faith and confidence in God is dimming because human beings are turning their back on it. Suppressing, as Romans 1 says, suppressing the truth about God. And as a result, when human beings suppress the truth about God, God always tries to call us back. But if we double down and insist, no, I can't be happy, I can't be free unless I'm my own master, I'm my own Lord, I'm my own God, there is no God. When I'm standing in that posture, right, what ends up happening is we don't respond to God's call to come back into the light. God gives us what we want because we're human beings, we're free. And so Paul tells us in Romans chapter 1 then, God gives us over to a senseless and darkened mind. And we begin by our own free choice to walk in darkness. And then there's consequences. What do human beings do? Human beings do politics. Human beings build cultures. Human beings have worldviews that they communicate. So if you're walking in darkness, now you're beginning then to communicate a different, seeing the world in that dark place, and you develop politics and culture and values and laws that instantiate this worldview now has gripped your mind and your will. I hope this doesn't seem too like abstract, but it's extremely concrete in its reality. So what ends up happening is human beings start building what's a culture of death, a way of life that starts honoring things that really are part of the kingdom of darkness in a fallen world and that come from a darkened mind. Right? So the culture is a way of life. And now a way of life is starting to emerge in society. And then that culture, out of that culture comes new laws, new legislation, a politics and a way of life that now is being kind of imposed on people. And it's a battle that actually ends up suppressing the light. So culture of death, how do you see it happening? Here in this case, the issue of abortion. In a culture of death, friends, death itself takes a kind of ascendancy again. In a culture of light, Jesus disarms it. In a culture of death, it takes a kind of ascendancy, and you can tell when it begins to lay hold because death itself becomes a solution, or maybe the solution to our most intractable problems. Well, what happens when I'm shocked by an unwanted pregnancy, an unplanned pregnancy? Right? What do people do? Oh my gosh, I'm a college student. This is going to wreck my college career. It's going to wreck my future. What am I going to do? What are my parents going to say? Tremendous panic and fear that starts gripping people. I'm losing control. I no longer have control. I need control to be happy. How can I ensure this control? Well, this is why some of the reasons why people get abortions. A lot of times for these reasons, to eliminate what is a huge problem that now confronts them that they don't have control over, and you don't want it to cause the kind of dramatic problems that they're beginning to think it's going to if they, go to full term with this baby and bring this, and keep this child and the consequences. So this is where the devil comes in and he starts talking to them. Here's a solution. You can end this just like this, and you can be free, and you don't have to disrupt or disturb anything in your life in the path that you're on. Right? And so death becomes a solution. Human beings take the prerogative of God and to say, no, I have a right to be happy and free, and I can't be unless I can take my child's own life. You see it on the other end of life too. I just saw a story up in Canada where, assisted suicide, where there was even a church involved in celebrating taking the life of somebody. They were singing hymns, and what ends up happening is that this culture, which is a way of life where you honor certain kinds of things. Now you see people celebrating their abortions, celebrating assisted suicide, celebrating the dominion of death, and they don't even see it because their senseless minds are darkened. Death becomes somehow the way to freedom, the power to wield death. And so it's also a place, friends. So that's a reality that we ought to pay attention to and understand what's going on underneath this whole thing. Why so much desperation? Because the powers and the forces of darkness and light are working in people, and they fall back into slavery to fear, Romans chapter 8 says. And then fear begins to dominate your life. And then people threaten you because they're taking away your security. So then those people become your enemy, and the conflict engages. Another key dimension of this, you can see the demonic root of it, is it's a demonic exchange. It's a demonic reversal. What do I mean? Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, died on a cross, and what did he reveal? The economy of God and the heart of God, the ground of reality, is the revelation that God is love. And what is love? Love is an exchange of my life for yours. I offer myself. We do this in marriage. We do this with our children. Jesus did it for us. Jesus shed his blood, gave his life for us so we could be free. That act of love has saved everyone who opens their heart to it. It's broken the powers of darkness and the lie of the kingdom of the devil, which is the reverse. If I'm going to be happy, if I'm going to be free, if I'm going to have the control I need for my life, someone else is going to have to die if need be, so I can secure that freedom. It's the complete reversal. Your life for mine, not my life for yours. And without the mind of God and the grace of God, people can't see the value of, no, there's nothing greater than me walking the footsteps of Jesus and humbling myself, accepting this reality that I brought on myself. And now, for the sake of this child in this life, I'm going to give myself in love, in service to it. But no, we're blinded by the fear of the lack of control and the panic that's there. So these are realities, friends, that are at work and at play here. And the only answer to it is the light of the gospel. So prayer, fasting, right? Walking ourselves in humility and kindness, praying for God's grace to love those who seem to be our enemies on these things, and grace to stand up and bear witness to the truth with dignity and the kind of peace and confidence that comes from hope and standing in the Lord. Friends, these are incredible times, intense times spiritually, and the Lord said he doesn't want us to be afraid, but to not let our hearts be troubled, but to walk in his peace in the power of the Holy Spirit so we can love God, love our neighbor, and fulfill that for which we ourselves have been made. God bless you, friends. Have a great day.